Welcome to Belmont Poetry Night. I am Monica Korde, your host and the Poet Laureate of Belmont, California. We meet on the third Tuesdays of every month to celebrate the spoken word as makers, listeners, and admirers of poetry. We come with featured guests sometimes and an open mic always. Although we may still not be at our favorite physical venue, the Belmont Library, since the pandemic, our thriving poetry circle has transitioned to this virtual space, and I am grateful this allows me to welcome poets and listeners from across the globe. It would be wonderful to know where you are joining me from, which part of the world. So please share in the chat. And thanks for joining me and zooming in. It is the 18th of October today. Imagine this day in 1587, Filipino ancestors arriving on the shores of California in what is now Morro Bay. October 18, 1587 marks the first recorded presence of Filipinos in the continental United States. And here we are on the same day in 2022, together in remembering, honoring, and celebrating this month commemorated as the Filipino American History Month. As I was curating this month's poetry night and searching for a theme, I browsed several words in the Tagalog language and chose the word Likha, which means creation. Let us all hold this word, this theme in our hearts as a way of honoring the history, pursuits, accomplishments, and legacy of the Filipinx communities in America. And let us celebrate their creations and contributions in the world through poetry. I would like to open with this piece that is delicate and dazzling in its creation all at once. Here it is, a poem by Luisa y Gloria. Orchard. It's fall, season of the apple, iconic fruit of this America. Mounds of excess littering the grounds of orchards from want of migrant hands to pick the harvest clean. There read the banner of every girl or woman who tips her head up to the knowledge of her power, which means she can see the way things work in the world. And she chooses not to be shamed any longer for calling it. For what did the hissing in the leaves tell her that she didn't already know? Or the laughter behind closed doors when she ran groping her way out? Don't pretend you don't know what I want, said every snake in the grass. Survival means no one dies, but someone is forced to take the fall. The smallest bird, the lowest fruit, though the fruit isn't to blame for its sheen, nor the star for making the place where its first light was seen. Thank you. Originally from Baguio, Philippines, Luisa y Gloria is the Poet Laureate of the Commonwealth of Virginia. The poem I read is from her book, Maps for Migrants and Ghosts, which reminds us how immigration compels transformation of both individual and shared stories. Taking this conversation ahead, we have with us tonight a Filipina voice that explores through poetry and breathes into existence the ethos of two different cultures she comes from. I'm most delighted to welcome Dina Klarisse as my featured poet for this evening. And let me first share about her. Dina Klarisse is a poet and freelance writer and editor based in the Bay Area. Poetry is her way of making sense of her experience as a queer Filipino American immigrant and recovering Catholic, as well as her interest in the intersections of history, language, culture, and identity. Her work has been published in ASU's Canyon Voices, The Daily Drunk Mag, Chopsticks Alley, Calopsia Literary Journal, among others. She is the author of the poetry chapbook, Handspun Rosaries. More of her writing can be found on her Instagram at hella_going and her blog, hellagoing.com. Welcome, Dina.
Thank you, Monica.
Maligayong padating.
Thank you. That was beautifully said.
Thank you. All right. So what would you like to start us off with?
Yes, so I'm going to begin with a short poem that I wrote in Tagalog. It's called Pagtanim. And I was inspired by the idea of roots, sowing roots, picking up roots, and replanting them elsewhere. It's written as a series of haiku. And after I read in Tagalog, I will also read the translation in English. Pagtanim. Galing sa lupa ang aming hangin, dugo. Binigay ninyo at pinagtanim ang aming ugat, dahon para sa buhay. Lumaki kami at lumalaki pa rin sa ibang dagat. Kasamang lupa ang dahon naming iba at magkamuka. Translation. From soil comes our breath, blood that you gave and planted, our roots, leaves for life. We grew and are still growing in another sea. With the soil, our leaves are different and still look the same. Thank you. For my next piece, I'm going to read a work out of my chapbook, Handspun Rosaries. This piece is in response to a story I read about the origins of sea salt. It's called Why the Ocean is Salty, from a book called Filipino Popular Tales. And I also was highly inspired by my friend and fellow poet at Sampaguita Press, the publisher of my chapbook, Maria Bolaños, who published her own chapbook called Sana. This is Pouring Salt. They've blamed us so long that to say blaming women is cliche is cliche. Sit us on rocks, comb our black hair, and turn our eyes into fiery stones of rage, apathy, pride, and lust. He said ocean was so tired of men building upon her a house of salt for a beautiful woman that she drowned them in her bosom. Seawater birthed from she who just wanted a good night's sleep. Poured from split cuticles onto gaping mouths, he was hungry, always has been, will always spit us out after sucking the marrow. Bodies need sodium chloride to maintain fluids, absorb and transport nutrients. You're welcome for her service. We have been salty for centuries, our millions of years in the making, splashing burning water into eyes that leer, rubbing cylinders of Morton onto slashed hands that grab us, then ask us what we were wearing, how much we drank, who we talked to, and what pitch and how loud, and when we were, and who are we and why. Story starts at Medusa's split ends. Story flows as Ophelia gurgles marsh water. Man dies. Story turns to myth, and arms bulge into heroes' biceps, strong enough to carry the weight of land and sea. Ocean is tired. Rheum rubbed into cornea until we are all swimming with the mermaids and sirens he invented. She drinks all the salt water she can as we evaporate to myth. And we write ourselves into story. Thank you.
That was fantastic. What an opening, Dina. Thank you so much for sharing both those pieces. And I would like to go back to both of those pieces and quote lines from the glorious opening piece first. The lines that connected with me and resonated a lot. We grew and are still growing in another sea. Those are such empowering, strong lines. And the closing lines from the second poem you just shared. Ocean is tired, room rubbed into cornea until we are all swimming with the mermaids and sirens he invented. She drinks all the salt water she can as we evaporate to myth, and we write ourselves into story. Great lines there in both these pieces, and in very different ways that they come into being. I sense a struggle with the idea of belonging and displacement, if I'm right. If you can tell me, Dina, being in an intercultural space, growing up as a Filipino American immigrant, did you struggle with the feelings of being a stranger at home? And how has this informed your poetic sensibility and craft?
Thank you. That's a really incredible question because yes, I think it is a universal feeling in the Filipinx American community. I think part and parcel with being part of this identity is kind of having 2 feet on each continent. I I just learned the term 1.5 generation because we are straddling the first gen and second gen, and that we are still highly experiencing the immigrant experience. We do feel that sense of otherness and stranger in a strange land here. Just one-off example that I can name from the top of my head is going into preschool, not knowing any English. I was lucky enough to have a big family who provided the support for me. But it was also a very scary and also jarring experience to see that the language that I grew up with and the language that I understand as that spoken by my ancestors and so many generations before me was not the language in the place that I'm going to call home and the place that I would grow up. That being said, being Filipino American, I think there also is a sense of stranger in our own mother culture. I talk a lot about this in my book, but a big part of my family's traditions revolves around our Catholicism and religion, and I will explore this in some more poetry that I read tonight. But that is one of I feel the most universal experiences in my generation, especially. I've also talked to people in other generations before me, and it's interesting that they share these same experiences of wanting to honor our culture and wanting to honor the language and the culture and traditions of our ancestors, but also forging a path that feels true to ourselves.
Yeah, that makes sense, Dina. And I really like how through your poetry, you explore all of these spaces, whether it's questions on identity or belonging and rootedness. I think it's a wonderful space for poetry to take us through and to navigate through these really complex notions of where we come from and what are we that we become in a new space. So thanks for sharing that, Dina. If you'd like to go for the next piece.
Yes, thank you. My next piece is called To the Ates in My Life. This was inspired by the idea of older sister, especially in Filipino culture, but I'm starting to realize in a lot of immigrant cultures, an older sister is essentially a third parent. And I wrote this in honor of my mother, Divina, my aunt, Daisy, who is here, and my friends, Kiana and Maria. As the youngest and only girl, Ate meant cousins I saw on holidays. Glamorous and distant, power in teenage wit and Sephora-lined smiles. Ate is the divine and the flower to little siblings. The head, shoulders, knees, and toes of a family. Surrogate mother when mother is out or away or gone. Wiper of asses and tears. Cook, lender, caretaker extraordinaire. She shoulders weight of time past and coming, inheritance of burden and love. Ate is the person I missed but never knew. Portrait of the artist as bunso, the youngest ever lonely in a family of boys, seeking in shadows behind tangled-haired Barbies lined in counsel, a sister to braid whispered understanding into hair. To a girl craving response deeper than laughter, who picked cherry blossoms from tan bark to place upon the altar when asking for someone who should have come in the negative space before. Ate was a revelation when I found her in friends, placing in their hands my tears and my laughter. Portrait of the artist as friend, no longer alone, only sometimes lonely. Friends with a world where attention is like gold. Chikahan is communion. Chismis is Eucharist. Ate in the trust that we will never speak our secrets, but to one another. I too am Ate, trying my hardest to look cool, brushing wit and kindness into strands of carefully careless beauty, but still open enough to hold secrets and shoulder burdens. I look to Ma and crave, despite the tired in her eyes, her strength and responsibility, and I feel it passed on. The youngest and only girl is still the oldest girl. But among this sea of Ates, I am ever stronger, ever more loving, and ever more loved. Thank you.
Beautiful, Dina. Among the sea of Ates, I am ever stronger, ever more loving, and ever more loved. Wonderful lines. And in your poems, although mostly written in English, and the first one that you shared was in Tagalog, but all your other poems also that we'll be listening to next, they often carry Tagalog words and phrases, like from this one, ate, bunso, chikahan, and more that we will hear later as well. Tell us what guides your choice of language in your poetry, and how do you explore bilinguality through your writing?
Thank you. Yes, I do incorporate a lot of Tagalog into my writing. One, because I do want to honor it as my mother tongue. It's the first language that I learned to express myself in. It's a language that I still share with my family. But also my primary language nowadays is English. And I think that I'm holding on to Tagalog as much as I can, and I try to honor it as much as I can in my poetry. That being said, I also use it out of necessity, one, and two, because I do largely still think many words in Tagalog, especially, and I don't know about other people who are bilingual, but there are certain expressions, especially expletives, that just don't hit the mark in English. So when I trip or drop something, I do speak in Tagalog. Ate means older sister in Tagalog, but it also means so much more to that. Ate, like Didi in Hindi, is something that you use for other women in your space, for any woman who is helping you. You use that word as a sort of way of honoring their name. So I feel that words like these have so much power that doesn't really translate when you use the English counterpart. I don't think ate is honored in the same way when you say older sister. It doesn't carry the same weight as I'm sure Didi would. Chikahan and chismis are fun words. I just think Tagalog is a really fun, rhythmic language anyway. So I do use it as like a vehicle to carry beat in my poetry. And I also think it's really fun.
It definitely is. Especially the poem that you had shared in Tagalog, we got to hear a lot more of the language and the melody it carries within the rhythms, like you said. And it was a lot of fun to hear the sounds as well. And also, what I just thought of what when you were talking about this is that when you're writing these words into poetry, besides the value that they add. And the weight that they add to the word itself. Do you also have a feeling that you would like to introduce your language to others and
Yeah,
share that culture, part of culture and language?
definitely. I think a big part of it is me wanting to share my language and culture with people who may not have experienced it before. And also I do like challenging my readers and myself. As a student of English, I just love language and I love playing with it. So when I incorporate Tagalog words, I also challenge myself to think, how can I relay this message without providing a
Mm,
definition? And I think a
mm,
large part of that is because as a reader, I have a lot of fun using context clues to figure out what an author or a poet is saying without them needing to explicitly say it. And I think incorporating different languages is a really easy but also fun way to do that.
absolutely, and it is a fun challenge for the poet. So it's you are doing a fantastic job at that, Dina. Let's hear another piece from you, and then I'll have a question again after that.
Sure. My next piece is called Home is Where They Hold Me. This is one of my favorite pieces from my collection. It's written in honor of my parents and the sacrifices they gave to raise my brothers and me. Scratch that. You were my first American home. In this land and the one before, the one waiting in the after. You who sweated with pamaypay over my infant body, humming through brownout night. You who sat in night shift worn clothes at kitchen table, needle and thread in calloused fingers. One nursed strangers through midnights and mornings, came home to closed eyes. One stitched metal parts through midnights and mornings, came home to closed eyes. Four furrowed brows, searching for a peace in our sleep. 20 fingers holding us up against blinding California sunrise. We were always home in you. Arms and legs perched against rainstorm, feet wide on shaken ground. And when we lost more than I could ever remember, you swallowed tears and tired and dug another foundation and another. So throw the coins from your shoulders and shake holy water from pores. Each bad spirit scared and negotiated away from your terror and your tender. House blessings are infinite when my zip code is our name. I've prayed 1,000 rosaries and never spoke a single grace until I turned the corner and saw your lights, forever on and calling. Thank you.
That was exquisite, Dina. Thank you so much for offering that piece. And as you mentioned previously, I understand that you are a recovering Catholic, and your debut poetry collection, Handspun Rosaries, invites a, a very tender and loving introspection into faith and what truly connects us all, what is holy within. Do you find that the training for inner unfoldment, if we can call it, influences your understanding of poetry?
Definitely. I think I first really turned to poetry as a necessity when I was a teenager, when I first started battling with my identity, including religion. Poetry was really what made sense as a way to explore that. I think as a Catholic, I also had a head start because Catholic music is just so incredible and poetic, and something that is still largely a part of my life. I think I already had those tools in my toolbox when I started exploring it. And I think the questioning that I started when I was younger in challenging my religious identity, challenging belief, I think that really did inform how I write poetry and how I articulate and I face all the different identity challenges in my life. I think I am stronger because I faced that crisis so early in my life. I remember starting to question my religion as early as 6 years old. And I think having to have my foundations shaken that early, I was used to the tectonic shifts that would come later in adolescence and then early adulthood.
Right. And as how challenging was it, Dina, for you to express all of that and put it in a book? I'm sure, I mean, knowing people are going to hear you, your family, friends, how challenging was it for you to put it all in on the page?
I don't think it was as challenging as it to put the words on pages as it was to tell my family. There was a book coming out where I was talking about not following the religion anymore. A lot of them are here today, and I want to thank my family for being as supportive as they are of my work, even if we don't largely agree on things. They've been incredibly supportive. They've been a bit challenging, and I welcome that. I think part of the reason why I wrote this was to have something to share when asked, well, why don't you believe in God anymore? What does this mean in terms of you being in the family? What does this mean in terms of you carrying on our traditions? I now have an easy reference point to hand off to them. But it was incredibly challenging, I think, because as the only daughter in my family, as a grandchild in a family of 14 grandchildren, where a big part of how we practiced being a family and how we came together as a family revolved largely around church and prayer. I wanted to express that I am not angry or that I'm not completely turning away from this part of my life. And I wanted to strike that balance between not believing, but also still practicing and still honoring the traditions that feel important to me. I think that was the most challenging, was finding that balance.
Thank you for sharing that, Dina. Beautifully put and expressed those really complex feelings and thoughts. Let's go ahead and hear more from what you have to offer.
Sure. So my next pieces are actually new poems that I'm including in a manuscript I'm working on. It's the manuscript's working title is called Physics for Daughters, but I wanted to explore our conceptualization of reality and where we are in the world, but also focus that on being a daughter and what that means when you navigate the world as a daughter of immigrants, a daughter who is an immigrant. And it was also largely inspired by the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. So this poem is called Love Was Never a Delicate Thing. And it's about love languages and the type of love I experienced. Love was never a delicate thing. It was the broad shoulders that shouldered scary things in the night, the rich alto that sang Sunday praise and belted until eternal death fell to its knees, lost in the full velvet of a love-soaked sorrow. Every daughter knows sorrow is a lovely thing. The heaviness of breath in wails deeper than any grave, the selfish selfishness in stubborn love. Kanin steamed with tears when I insisted I was full. Calloused hands that will always be cupped and waiting to catch me long after I have learned the right way to fall. I am starting to feel the smarting pain when loved ones skin their knees. Soak gauze in my sucking in of breath. Anger at them more than pavement, that they dare run free in a world where my love can't always reach. My hands grow calloused as I scrub and cook and wash and fold, lingering threads of cotton slipping between the ridges of fingerprints growing drier with each wash. I smell like sauteed onions and garlic, oil splattering on clothes I will need to wash again. Once we've eaten and I see the smile on their face, when the salt and oil and glucose molecules break open and nourish every cell that make up the ones I love. Death is at bay for now. I am singing at the stove and sink, my own breathy alto singing a familiar praise. Thank you.
Let's hear one more, Dina, and then I'll pause you for a question.
Sure. This next piece is called Between the Raindrops I'm Watching, and I wrote this as an offering to Anitun Tabu, who is a Filipino goddess of rain. I am rain. The soil between his fingertips, fruit round in her palm, I was whispered into flesh among thunder and rainstorm. My beloved, born of 1,000 islands and dancing wind, who often forget you are not the only ones. That is to say, the littlest of creatures who crawl between your toes are held at the mercy of your hunger and plight. Not unlike us, we the spinners of clouds and singers of sun. When your gods were taken and you were pressed into gray stone churches, I went with you. And still you sang for me, nestled between the consonants of their tongue, woven through the blessings of another god. Who could know the extent of your cruelty, forgetting the bones and thumping hearts that you share, ripping soil to suck every morsel of your mother's blood. And still you sing for me. My sister waters rising higher than your most callous dreams could fear. I am rain. I am typhoon and thunder, singing the centuries of your dances and your forgotten tongues. And we banished, we the gods of buried soil, we sit under the old growth and cement buildings and traffic lights. Is your new god as lovely? Even he is vanishing behind your imaginings of him. When he asks me how to stand with no flesh, I will tell him, we are here to remember. Thank you.
Spectacular, Dina, and what a wonderful reading of both those pieces, especially this one that you just read. Fantastic delivery, and it just comes to life in your voice. I love the question that you put: is your new god as lovely? That's a very strong point in the poem, I see. And I'm really glad that you read both these pieces together, in the sense that since you mentioned you're also working on a new manuscript, Physics for Daughters, you said? That's what it's called, or going to be called. And that's what I was also looking at. Your poetry in general is how it pulls many threads from different experiences of your life, rooted within your heritage, religion, and identity. I also see how your poems intricately weave the female persona into your poems. Girl, daughter, sister, ma. We hear these words in your work, even ate. As a Pinay woman and poet, what direction does your feminist poetry take?
I think that probably every poem I read is largely informed by my feminism. I use this perspective not consciously all the time. I think it's how I view the world. Specifically as a Filipino American, I also want to analyze and deconstruct the colonialism and the colonialist heritage that we've carried on. A large part of this is buried in our religion, and also the way that women, daughters, sisters, mothers are positioned in society. Again, I was lucky to be raised in a family who is very supportive, but we also, I don't think we can ignore the still rampant sexism and misogyny, just in general society, but also like specifically in Filipino culture. And I think that what I'm seeing and what I love to see in not just in my generation of poetry, but just poetry, because it is a vehicle to explore and deconstruct ideologies, the tearing down of these structures and exploration of feminist identity. A lot of my poetry is also inspired by mythology. I'm just a nerd for mythology, both Western, Eastern, in any context. But I found that oftentimes, especially in Western mythology, and not just mythology, but going into the tradition of literature, for the better part of the history of literature, women are often written as vehicles to a plot or vehicles to a male character development. I reference this as Medusa and Ophelia in one of my poems. And I also wanted to bring this as the female goddess of rain, as a way of taking back our history and our stories.
Right, and thank you for enriching all of us, Dina, tonight with all that your poem holds, each of your pieces. And I do have one more question for you, but let us hear your poem first, and then I will have it as a closing question for you.
Sure. My next piece is called "If You Want to Learn How to Laugh," and this was inspired by a prompt by one of my good friends, Chris Saldana, who founded Luya Poetry, which is a wonderful poetry collective based in Chicago. But they held a NaPoWriMo, National Poetry Writing Month, action or program this year, and they had really great prompts. This is inspired by my mom and my aunties, Baba, Daisy Casada, you're one of them. It's called "If You Want to Learn How to Laugh." If you want to learn how to laugh, just ask my ma and titas, or better yet, sit and observe. They pull laughter from diaphragm and belly. No cute giggles covered by delicate thin fingers here. We are big happy. The sound reverberating across ribs like a xylophone, the drumming against our navels, tickling insides, so we laugh harder and more. Titas cackle with mouths stretched like eating sunshine, fillings and cavities to the wind until fresh outside cleanses us. Because what is life but a funny anecdote when you're thousands of years in the making? What's funny is that we are also masters of sorrow. Sit us before a casket, and we will reach into the recesses of a loved one's past. We miss those we did not know simply because we're surrounded by they who love them. We are conjurers of sunshine and tidal waves. Our wails the pounding fists against heaven's door, demanding every angel to hear our goodbyes. If you want to learn how to mourn, just ask my ma and titas to pray. And listen to the banished children of Eve beseeching a forgiving they don't need. Don't ever tell them that, because if you want to learn how to hurt, ask my ma and titas a question about their faith. It's the soft curve of mother's hands when she weeps for children bound to earth's rains. My ma and titas fingerprint their deepest longings on beads and twine, kiss pendants and marble and wood to transfer the whispers of eternal life and the sorries of lapsed promises and escaped gossip. If you want to learn the universe, sit down and inhale the perfume of a people who mold time like clay and hold laughter in bellies and sorrow in lungs. Deeper than the tides, louder than the sunshine. Thank you.
Woohoo! What stunning lines there, Dina, and I think this particular piece also, like all the other pieces, in fact, is so rich in its visual imagery. Also, I really love how it comes through, and I want to go back to the lines that really stayed with me. We are conjurers of sunshine and tidal waves. Our wails, the pounding fists against heaven's door, demanding every angel our goodbyes. And I just feel there is so much hope and tenderness in your writing, Dina. My closing question to you would be, with so much light around you, how has the Fil-Am community inspired you and your writing? What is your advice to young poets who are looking for ways to express themselves through poetry? And we do have young poets in the audience today, so it would be perfect to hear that from you.
Thank you, Monica. This is my favorite question because I love talking about our community. I think the Fil-Am community is incredible. It's just a representation of how helpful and generous and loving our culture is. I would not be anywhere I am if it weren't for just fellow Filipinx poets and community members extending a hand and helping me. I met you, Monica, through our good friend Eileen Casaneto, who's been largely an ate to me, a mentor, an advisor, and having elders in this community and having mentors and having people that I can look up to who aren't just here to be successful on their own right. They're also here to put other people in the spotlight. I just came back from the Filipino American International Book Festival this weekend in San Francisco. And it was just so incredible seeing all these authors and publishers and bookshops and comic book companies celebrating what it means to be Filipino, but also showing how good and incredible our work is, while also spotlighting each other. I think the art industry, and especially the literature industry, can sometimes seem so competitive. We're all clawing our way to get recognition and to be known and to publish, but I don't feel that in poetry, and I don't feel that in my Filipino American community. I really do feel that we have the shared belief that if one of us wins, then all of us wins. So why not just have all of us win? And that's something that I owe largely to my community.
Absolutely, Dina. I hear you. And thank you once again for sharing work that recognizes the fluidity of cultural identities and creates a healing and comforting space for everyone, especially those who are far from home. Really grateful for your poems and your time. Salamat, Dina. And I will open the floor up briefly for questions or comments before we close this segment. And while I do that, I'll go ahead and share a couple of links in the chat on Dina's work and her poetry collection. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and talk to Dina.
Dina, really quick, I really enjoyed your presentation. I just was wondering brief how queer culture in the Philippines is different than here. Also, I loved Rain. I Am Rain was my favorite of what you read. And I like that you talked about the Catholic issues. So those are three topics I don't know, but thank you so much.
Of course, thank you for your question, Steve. From what I heard, I think you wanted to know about queer culture in the Philippines and how it's different than here.
Possibly, yeah.
Yes. So growing up, it felt paradoxical because here we are with a largely conservative religion, but also with a very open mind to gay and lesbian and queer people. I grew up with aunts, uncles, cousins who were openly gay and trans. To be fair, we did not have very deep discussions on what that means and how that interacts with our religion. But I also saw that they were welcomed and they were included in our family and in our communities without any question. And this goes back to even before me. When I talked to my mom about it, she talked about how one of her aunts, one of my grandpa's, one of her great aunts, I think, one of my grandpa's aunts, was openly married to a woman, not officially because it's not legal in the Philippines, but just living with a woman, had always lived with a woman. And that's just what everyone accepted. So I think it's interesting because on one level, it does feel more open. And I feel that we can be a lot more accepting of queer and trans members of the community, but there also is the element of Catholicism that feels like a looming umbrella over all of us.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for your question.
I'm Rosemary. I really like the line, "We have been salty for centuries." And that just made me smile because that's true of Latinos too. You know, we have been salty for centuries. And it really rang true to me. And a lot of your poems are similar to some of the ones I've written about my identity and in my place in my family. So thank you very much. It was very, very nice. It was like going home.
Thank you. Oh, that means so much to me. Hello, salty women.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, then. Grateful to all of you for listening to Dina. And Dina, we will look forward to more new work from you. And I wish you the best for the same as well. I hope you too enjoyed being here tonight. Thanks once again for offering such delightful pieces and reading them so beautifully as well.
Thank you, Monica. I'm just going to quickly link the order page for Handspin Rosaries, just in case anyone would like to
Sure.
purchase it.
Perfect. Yeah, please feel free to add that as well in the chat. Thank you. Okay, with that, we are going to stop recording this segment. Those of you who are in the Zoom room, please stay online for the open mic segment of the evening. We have youth poets on the open mic joining us tonight as well. And to the YouTube audience, thanks for joining in and hope to see you for next month's virtual Belmont Poetry Night. Good night.